Story 1. I was a kitchen supervisor in a nursing home. We had a dishwasher who, on his third day, pulled the fire alarm on purpose to get out of his shift. I was part of the investigation because I was the supervisor on duty. He gave human resources a wild story that he and another coworker were roughhousing and he was pushed into the alarm. As he fell, his shirt got caught on the lever and pulled it. Human resources then showed him the camera footage of him looking to make sure nobody was watching and then pulling the alarm on purpose. After he was fired, we found out from another coworker that he had also been suspended from his high school a couple of months earlier for pulling the alarm at school. Story 2. I worked at an automotive original equipment manufacturer and saw only two types of summary terminations. One involved leaking photos of pre-production items and stealing. My favorite case was a guy who stole a set of prototype tires and rims and then put them on his truck in the parking lot. The manager, who had been looking for the missing items, happened to walk by the truck on his way to work and realized those were the tires he was missing. The manager fired the employee on the spot and took the tires back while he was being terminated. So when the employee left jobless, his truck was on supports with no tires. Story 3. Things started going missing from people's desks. The culprit remained elusive until one day he showed his new iPod to another coworker. On the back, it was engraved with the name of a different coworker who had just had his new iPod stolen. Managers were summoned. He was gone within minutes, and so were all the unsolved thefts. Story 4. Many years ago, I had an obstetrics and gynecology appointment. A test had come back abnormal, and things had to be discussed. I was young and scared. All I heard was cancer and infertility. I just started crying. My doctor was wonderful and explained everything. I was reassured but still scared. The doctor and her nurse left the room, and I got dressed. As I left the examination room, walking by the nurse's area, I saw and heard her nurse mocking me. Wah, can I still have kids? Wah. Not only was I hurt, but I was also angry. As I was rushing to leave, I passed the doctor's office. She was sitting at her desk doing paperwork. I knocked on her doorframe with tears in my eyes. I thanked her for being wonderful but told her I would not be treated that way by her nurse. She then asked me what I meant. When I told her, she took me by the hand, and together we walked back to the nurse's desk. She directly asked her if what I said was true. The nurse fumbled over her words and basically said yes but did not mean anything by it. The doctor said, "Get your things and get out of my office. You're fired." I never saw that nurse again, but I respected my obstetrics and gynecology doctor even more. Story 5. Viewing child pornography on a work computer at the clinic where he worked as a social worker resulted in a police escort and coverage in the newspaper's crime section. Story 6. I kicked a service dog, thinking I was not watching. I already knew this particular employee did not like dogs, which is fine as a personal preference, but this one was quietly standing off to the side of the hallway. It was clear she went out of her way to kick it. I fired her on the spot. Story 7. Arrived at the parking lot at 9 a.m. drunk and sideswiped a manager's car, then casually walked to his desk. He was escorted out about 5 minutes later. Bonus. Another employee told a customer, "I wouldn't buy the big bag of food," when they called to check on their dog's test results. This was not a veterinarian with a dark sense of humor. It was a customer service representative responding to someone who had called a laboratory to check on results. The representative did not have the authority to disclose results. Story 8. Years ago, I worked with a woman who applied for a small loan. I don't remember what it was for, but it was definitely something specific. She was approved for $5,000 and told me the news as if she had won the lottery. She then did not show up the following day and never came back. This was a preschool, so that complicated things for the week, but we managed to make it work until someone could fill the position permanently. I remember the director commenting that what she did was very foolish and that he would never hire her again. About a year later, I ran into her at Walmart, where she was refolding some shirts. We only briefly caught up, but she mentioned with wide, shocked eyes that the school would not hire her back when she came looking for work again. Shockingly, it had not taken her long to spend her winnings. Story 9. left a series of drunk, very explicit voicemails on my phone comparing me to the girl in the adult movie he was watching and describing in detail the actions he was performing on himself. Human resources had to transcribe them all for the documentation. It was vile. Story 10. We had an employee who was accused of sexual harassment. We held a meeting with him to hear his side of the story and instructed him not to speak to anyone about the matter, especially anyone he suspected might have reported him, while we completed the investigation. He was told to return to his office and continue working. We did not disclose the identity of the accuser. After taking 10 minutes to decide to terminate his employment and confirming with human resources that all procedures had been followed, the employee responded by entering the accuser's office, closing the door, leaning against it to prevent her from leaving, and yelling at her. He was immediately terminated. Story 11. My wife's company has a booth at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas every year. I went with her one year. We were going up to our room from the casino when one of the guys she works with was sprawled out drunk halfway in the elevator. A couple of his friends were trying to help him up. I heard him say, "Oh no, don't tell Phil," the owner of the company. Phil was standing right next to me. Story 12. Oh, I remember another one. We sent a couple of sales representatives on a work trip. One married man, Bill Smith, and one woman who was not his wife. They submitted expense reports, and it was apparent that they had shared a room for the duration. It was confirmed they were having an affair on the company dime. I am not sure who was fired and who quit, but they were both gone by the time I was hired to work the phones. Not long after I started, I received a call from a woman asking for Bill Smith. I explained that we did not have a Bill Smith on my list of employees, and the woman said, "Oh yes, you do. I am his wife, and he is a vice president there." I put her on hold and asked around. I was told that Bill used to work there but no longer did. I had to explain to this woman that Bill truly no longer worked there. She was not, in any way, shape, or form, pleased to hear this, and I am not entirely sure she believed me anyway. My coworkers were delighted to fill me in on the gory details later. If I recall correctly, one of the senior staff agreed to call Bill's wife, possibly ex-wife, and handle things. Story 13. Police arrived at the door. The new employee said they wanted to speak with him. He packed up his belongings as if leaving for the day, even though he was only 1 hour into his shift. The police identified themselves as part of a task force dealing with child protection. They wanted to speak with the new employee and had been trying to reach him outside of work for days. The new employee was interested in computers and had no children. He never returned. Story 14. After a brief discussion about tattoos and locations, she dropped her pants in the office reception area to show everyone the tattoo she had on her buttocks. No underwear, just full exposure. Before I could recover from my shock and tell her to pull her pants back up, a customer walked in and then immediately walked out. There were other issues, but that was the final straw. She was there for less than a week. Story 15. The secretary at the front desk was visibly intoxicated at 11 a.m. She was fired immediately and offered a ride home. She then went to a bar across the street and was removed by the police. It was discovered she already had a drunk driving conviction and was not supposed to be drinking. As a result, she went to jail. This is a sad story. Story 16. Our chief of security was caught stealing patients' valuables from the safe and was escorted out in handcuffs. Story 17. I worked in a Kmart store years ago that was being renovated. Our store manager was caught putting some boxes of floor tiles and buckets of paint in his car to use at his own house. We had a new manager the next morning. Story 18. Taking selfies and posting them to social media in a facility where photography is strictly prohibited is not allowed. A person took a selfie in front of some proprietary equipment and posted it to his Instagram. Within 30 minutes, he was escorted out of the facility. Story 19. A man went on an expensive personal trip to a tropical island and charged the entire expense to his corporate American Express card. He then claimed the card was stolen and the charges were not his, despite the hotel and airline tickets being clearly in his name. Story 20. A guy I worked with when I sold suits in a department store was a problem for a while. He liked to take much longer than he was supposed to on his breaks, acted like a jerk to coworkers, went to the bathroom and was gone for 45 minutes at a time, and so on. Management let it slide because he was a top seller and signed up many people for the store card. Until one day he mouthed off to the wrong manager. He was gone on one of his 45-minute bathroom trips when she came by making her rounds. I had told her that he had disappeared again and happened to be still fixing a rack nearby when he came back. She made a comment about how he could not keep disappearing like that, and he thought it was appropriate to ask her, "Do you want to come to the bathroom with me and hold it so you know where I am?" He was gone the next day. Story 21. A security sergeant called from home. I left a CD in the sergeant's office computer. Take it out and put it in my desk, but do not look at it. The CD contained illegal content involving minors. He was not only fired, but using such material in a federally controlled institution was a felony-level offense. I never saw him again. Story 22. A man I knew was fired for being late too often. The labor union tried to get his job back through arbitration, but he was late for that as well. Story 23. I wasn't in the meeting, but I was in the office when it happened. A woman called into a meeting while driving. It was not the best choice, but not the worst. Until she got cut off by a black driver, forgot to put herself on mute, and yelled an offensive racial slur. She worked on a 10-person team, and about 6 of her coworkers were black. She did not have to be escorted out of the office because she was working from home that day. Story 24. A nurse accessed the health records of their neighbor, with whom they were having a property dispute. The neighbor found out because the nurse threatened to share the information with other neighbors. The nurse was immediately fired and sued. Story 25. Someone did a fire watch at a very expensive store. The cheapest item in the store was at least $1,000. A fire watch is when the fire alarm, detection, or suppression system is not working or has been shut off. Someone must be in the building 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The site paid well, about $30 per hour, to do almost nothing with no risk. It was in a good part of town. The person bought 3 prostitutes and drugs, and engaged with them at the front desk and in multiple areas of the store. He had access to the security cameras, so he knew where everything was being recorded and assumed no one would notice. He left bodily fluids on the front desk, as well as trash and used condoms in the store. On the plus side, they agreed to pay me $35 per hour for every shift, with overtime for a few days afterward. Story 26. Pulled a piece on a shift supervisor. We were working in retail, and the manager was a complete jerk all the time. You know the kind, the type of person who gets super into company spirit and power trips over their first job with a little authority. Still didn't deserve what happened. This guy who got hired with me had been complaining about him for a bit. One shift, I went into the back room, where we took cardboard to the compactor, and I don't know what started it, but I heard them yelling at each other. The manager never laid a hand on him that I saw, but this guy was really getting up in the manager's face, and one thing led to another. Suddenly, he had a gun in his hands pointed at the manager. I don't know if you can call it immediate termination. The guy held it up. The manager threw up his hands begging him not to shoot. The guy just kept it trained on him and then left. Police got called, but I never found out what happened to him. I just know he definitely didn't work there anymore. Story 27. I had to report another emergency room nurse for being extremely intoxicated on shift. Not even still drunk from last night intoxicated. No. Started drinking at 8 a.m. on his break, intoxicated. Story 28. We worked at a satellite media company. A customer support representative was impressed with the speed of the customer's network and seeded public torrents on their network over the weekend. The customer was a television and radio conglomerate. Story 29. Had sexual intercourse in the company's lactation room while on break and posted it on social media immediately afterward. Several coworkers saw the post right away. Both employees were terminated immediately. Story 30. When I worked as a mortgage loan processor, I discovered that the loan officer was falsifying documents to get a fraudulent mortgage approved. I worked with the manager to re-verify all the documentation and document how and why the documents he provided were fraudulent. He was called into the manager's office and confronted, whereupon he got up, ran to his car, and left. Story 31. I was asked to precept a nurse for a day to see if he was ready to be off orientation. I corrected a couple of documentation issues. When I watched him administering medications, he was giving the wrong dose of a medication. I pulled him aside and corrected him. He shouted, "A woman can't tell me what to do." He backed me into a corner. I thought he was going to assault me, so I pushed past him and called his supervisor. He was out half an hour later. The supervisor was looking for a reason to fire him and took this opportunity to do so. Story 32. We eliminated the position of one of our longtime employees. She was difficult to work with and filed human resources complaints frequently about perfume smells, people walking around in sandals that made flapping sounds, radios being too loud, and similar minor issues. These complaints were not serious enough to warrant termination, but we needed to let her go. As part of the agreement, she received a 40-week severance package. The terminated employee's manager was relatively new, so immediately after her termination, his vice president instructed him to contact Information Technology Security and obtain access to her emails, private directories, and instant messages. Later that day, the manager informed me that they had fired a longtime female privacy administrator shortly after lunch. When he accessed the terminated employee's instant messages, he discovered vile and offensive exchanges between her and the privacy administrator, who were close friends. They used offensive and racist nicknames for him and other managers and vice presidents in the company, and all of this was saved on the company's IT servers. At the end of the day, my vice president expressed frustration that she had not reviewed those instant messages before terminating the employee and awarding her a $56,000 severance package because the employee could have been fired for cause, saving the company a significant amount of money. Story 33. Guy was a temporary employee and had been there for a while. The company had an unofficial policy to make any temporary employee permanent if they wanted it after about 18 months. Since there was no other way to get a permanent job there, this was highly desirable. It included many benefits, better pay, and job security. The week after becoming permanent, he completely stopped trying, started arriving late, and refused to do anything he considered not his job. He was given several warnings, including that they would fire him if he continued. Still, he thought he was untouchable, but they fired him about a week later. Story 34. I was training a new 17-year-old cashier at an electrical retailer. We used to have music television on the display TVs. The cashier saw a man watching an Avril Lavigne video, walked over to him and said, "She's attractive. I'd make an inappropriate comment about her." He lasted 17 minutes as an employee. My favorite part was explaining to his mother when she called to complain about me not giving him a fair chance. Story 35. I used to work for a premier technology retailer. A coworker, who was a notorious scrounger, took a fellow employee's nice sunglasses from his locker in the break room. The employee asked around for days if anyone had seen his lost sunglasses. A few days later, the scrounger wore the sunglasses back to work. There was an instant confrontation, and the scrounger was fired. Story 36. A medical laboratory technician who also worked as a courier for the company serving the laboratory had her job before mine. She was fired from both jobs when bits of her lunch, during a courier shift, were found inside the sample bags she was delivering. The contamination was inside 2 of the 3 layers of sealing. The only way this could happen was if she was tampering with the samples during her lunch break, which also meant she did not keep them in the transportation coolers. Story 37. I had a manager, let's call him Paul, who didn't like me for whatever reason, which was a first for me. I've always had a reputation for being dependable and a hard worker. The 2 managers above him announced they were going to start their own business together and would be leaving the company in about a month. Within a few minutes, Paul came up to me with a huge grin and said, "Just wait until they're gone and I'm promoted. I'm going to fire you." I asked him what I had done to him, and he explained that he felt I was a brown-noser and the only reason I had my job was because his 2 bosses liked me. So it was my fault I was likable. I told the 2 bosses who were leaving what Paul said to me, and their response was, "We'll take care of it." An hour later, they caught Paul and another employee in the parking lot smoking weed in his car, which was against company policy. Paul was fired immediately. Story 38. I was Tier 1 support. We had a Tier 3 support technician who was inappropriate, and I could not believe he had not been fired. I was working with him on an issue one morning, then could not reach him that afternoon. I asked the manager where he was and was told he was gone and would not be back. Later, I heard he had been caught in a storage room with the wife of one of the directors. A month later, I had his job and had to clean up his laptop. Story 39. An auto service technician decided to take a customer's $500,000 sports car for a quick joyride after completing his work on it. It was a simple interior repair and did not require a test drive afterward. Our strict policy was to park cars like this in a special designated area for high-end vehicles. However, he decided to take it around the block quickly. After accelerating through an intersection, he lost control and collided with a large tree, totaling the car. He was okay but was terminated immediately. Story 40. Two stories. I worked in a hotel. On New Year's Eve, a man called out sick. The shift before, he took a block of rooms and marked them as out of order, which no one questioned because we were not very busy at the business hotel in the suburbs. He also made a bellman's key, which is a key that can open any room. On New Year's Eve, he sneaked into the hotel poorly with about 40 friends, including sex workers. He started a party in the out-of-order rooms. However, he did not block off the entire floor, so other guests called down complaining about the loud noise and naked women running up and down the hallway. He was fired and kicked out before the night was over. I also worked at a fast food place. I worked with a troublesome person who always got into trouble. I was doing my job while this other man was playing with a new knife a few feet away, making stabbing motions with his hand and the knife. I turned, and he accidentally stabbed me in the hand. It was not on purpose, but the knife hit about 1 millimeter from the main artery in my hand. I had never seen blood squirt before this. I was taken to urgent care. The man was gone before I returned. There was no major damage, but I required 3 stitches. I still have a scar more than 20 years later. Story 41. One company I worked at sponsored a major football team. One day we were offered a free raffle for some seats. An email went out to the whole company explaining how to enter. A relatively new employee replied to all, saying, "I bet those marketing people keep this for themselves." He did not last until the end of the day. Story 42. I worked for a swimming pool maintenance company some years ago. Every pool technician had a van equipped with tools, chemicals, and equipment. A first-year employee was arrested on the job for smoking methamphetamine in the van at a convenience store. A police officer in the parking lot witnessed the act, and the employee had drugs and a pipe on him at the time of the arrest. I received a phone call from the boss asking if my helper had a license, and we had to go pick up the van. I never saw the person again. Story 43. I worked in an information technology role at a collections call center. A new agent took a call. The person said they needed to call back later to make the payment. You do not get credit unless you actually take the payment. The new agent used his debit card to schedule a payment for the next day, so he could get credit when the customer called back to provide the correct card information. He also informed his manager so they would know what was happening when the customer called back. He was difficult during the onboarding process. We felt like he was setting us up for something. He was very demanding and adamant about accommodations. It turned out he was a 50-year-old inexperienced employee. He lasted 3 days after training. Story 44. Our team worked Saturday, Sunday, and Monday on 12-hour shifts. We had a woman who constantly called in on Saturday, claiming her child was sick. On Sunday, she showed up after calling in the day before, wearing a t-shirt from a concert she attended on Friday night. As she walked out, I heard her tell the supervisor, "I can't believe you are firing a single mother with a sick child." Story 45. A man at my previous job called in sick, then went live on Instagram from a pool party with our manager's niece. He was tagged in the video. During the next shift, he showed up as if nothing had happened but was escorted out before he could clock in. Story 46. In the 1990s, our system could not prove that one of my programmers was watching inappropriate content. We suspected it but could not terminate him without exact details. We were receiving a system upgrade, and I had his supervisor warn him that the new system would provide proof of who was accessing forbidden websites. He ignored the warning and was fired. In a highly classified government office, another contractor from a different firm was angry and threatened to delete the work he had done on wargame modeling. He was escorted out immediately and lost his clearance. Story 47. This is from back when cell phones were rare, the world still ran on landlines, and daytime calls outside your city were very expensive. My company had a system that logged phone calls for accounting purposes. A man came in on a weekend with a friend, disconnected the printer that logged outgoing phone calls, and made a number of very expensive long-distance calls. I do not recall how he was caught. Either the logging system had cached the data and printed it when the printer was reconnected, or someone saw the call history when the bill arrived. Either way, they identified who was responsible because he was exactly the kind of person who would do something like that. He was promptly fired but maintained contact long enough to write a poem about the perceived injustice of the incident and displayed the poem in the break room. Story 48. Used the hard R. When confronted and asked, "What did you say?" he responded, "What I said was," and repeated it. It was not an immediate termination because the corporate company still needed to complete the human resources process. However, he had to sit in an office with our Black district manager and Black human resources representative. Story 49. Day 1. Made a phone call in the break room, complaining about the place in Spanish. The manager is from Mexico, so he fired her in Spanish. Story 50. I worked at a Verizon corporate location for a while. Not many people realize this, but the amount of information available to representatives is startling. Because of that, we had to take strict ethics courses regularly. Those classes included, do not look up information you do not need, and do not look for celebrity or political figures' phone numbers or addresses. Makes sense. One employee looked up and allegedly succeeded in finding Barack Obama's personal phone number. Our system logged every action that representatives took, so before the employee could log out of the tablet, our manager received a call, and the employee was immediately terminated. It was a very big deal. Story 51. I used to work in this call center years ago. The supervisor was a young, very chill, intelligent man whom everyone liked. One day, he was fired immediately, left within 10 minutes, and no one heard from him again. It turned out he asked a coworker, who was his friend, to borrow $20. She was careless enough to give him her credit card and PIN and told him to go to the ATM. A few minutes later, she received a notification from the bank that several $100s had been withdrawn. She panicked, reported him to his boss, who became angry and fired him on the spot. It turned out the man had a serious online gambling problem, owed a lot of money, and this was the last straw. Story 52. I work in manufacturing. One day, a new employee was being introduced to the crew by our manager. When they got to our female line lead, she told him that if he needed anything, he should come to her. He blurted out, "Okay, so if I need help, I will come to you." He said it so nonchalantly that it took a moment for everyone to realize what he actually said. He was immediately escorted out. That kind of disrespectful behavior is not tolerated in our workplace. Story 53. Skating on the pallet jack like it was a scooter. I get it. I really do. There have been many times I have wanted to do the same thing myself. But this facility had many cameras. They had him from 4 angles and at least one eyewitness. He was caught. Story 54. One of the top executives at my husband's work got absolutely drunk at a Christmas party. He stood on a table in the middle of the banquet hall and told the chief executive officer his wife was unattractive, then told everyone to leave him alone. One of the funniest things I have ever seen. However, he never returned. It was career suicide. Story 55. Our human resources representative was married to one of our service technicians. All our work phones have the same combination to unlock them, and people are too lazy to change it. She had sent some intimate photos to her husband on the work phone. A coworker working with her husband asked to use his phone one day and sent the photos to himself. This resulted in at least half of our field employees seeing the human resources representative's intimate photos. The owner stepped in to identify who was sharing them once word had reached the office. A private investigator was already looking into it, and the individual responsible was gone only hours later. I am fairly certain he quit after the owner informed everyone that the matter was under investigation. Story 56. A new employee became heavily intoxicated at the office Christmas party and sexually assaulted a coworker's girlfriend. Fortunately, a particular individual did not witness the incident, or the consequences would have been severe. The employee arrived the following Monday appearing unwell, was taken to a meeting room by a manager, and quietly left. He was never seen again. Story 57. A man was working on a difficult software issue on the mainframe. He had been at it for about 20 hours straight. His manager approached him and told him to go home, get some sleep, and address the problem again in the morning. In response, he struck his manager in the face. I was working late as well and witnessed the incident. He was fired but was rehired a week later. As far as I remember, he solved the problem after he returned. Story 58. I used to work at a gym in Southern California, and we had one guy on our team as a trainer who was overconfident and disrespectful. He had the bad habit of pinching girls' butts, including some coworkers who thought he was a gift to women. Long story short, he pinched the wrong person one day. It happened to be the owner's daughter. I never saw him again after that day. Story 59. Saw a girl stir a beer she had just poured with her finger to reduce the foam, then hand it to the customer. Story 60. A couple of incidents stand out. My husband worked for a small company where he performed many tasks, including local area network administration. One day, a field sales representative came in with his laptop and said it was running slow. My husband checked and found it was slow because the laptop was filled with inappropriate content. He reformatted the computer, and it worked fine afterward. He and a colleague told the sales representative, "We noticed there were many large personal files on this computer. Just a reminder that work computers are for business use only. If you need something for personal files, here are some inexpensive laptops that will meet your needs." And they gave him some printed information from a local electronics store. The sales representative just muttered under his breath, grabbed the computer, and left. About 3 weeks later, he returned with the same running slow issue. Again, the laptop was filled with inappropriate content. My husband and his colleague felt they had already given this employee the benefit of the doubt once and decided not to do it again. They reported the situation to the company president, who said she would handle it. The employee was fired by the end of the day. For me, we hired a man named Ray. He was a bit odd, but we needed someone for the job. Ray came to the office during regular hours but did not seem very productive. Several people worked with him to determine if there was a training or comprehension issue, but none was found. After another week without much progress, we investigated and had our network team review Ray's activities. It turned out that Ray was spending most of his time trying to bypass the company firewall to view inappropriate content online while at work. Since Ray was still in his probationary period, he was informed at the end of the day that his services were no longer needed. Story 61. Got caught smoking by a female coworker in an area where no outside goods were allowed and smoking was strictly prohibited. He then doubled down on sexually harassing her. She was the wife of a senior executive in the company. He was escorted out immediately. Story 62. I worked in a restaurant. A customer collapsed in the crowded waiting area. I found out later it was a non-fatal heart attack. Good old Rolf, the stoner busboy, stepped over the customer who fell right in front of him and loudly announced, "Well, there goes another satisfied customer." Story 63. A new coworker who had been on the job for only a couple of weeks went into a patient's chart and took pictures with her phone of the clinical photos showing the patient's injury. The injury was gruesome. A high-speed car crash had completely split open the leg, exposing muscles, tendons, and bone. When asked why she took the photo, she said she intended to show it to her friends. When informed she was absolutely not allowed to take pictures of patient records or share private patient information with others, she responded, "Who is going to stop me? She was immediately terminated for serious violations of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Story 64. This was nearly 20 years ago. I worked in a meat shop in a grocery store. The store manager was a man, and the produce manager was his wife. He had an affair with a teenage cashier, although I am not sure if she was underage. He also bought her a car, or at least made payments on the car she drove. It had been suspected but was finally confirmed when another employee caught them eating lunch together, took a photo, and showed it to his wife in the store. She had a meltdown and screamed at him in front of the registers. He was fired, the cashier was fired, and the wife quit out of embarrassment. In all honesty, all three of them were unpleasant people. The store manager was a small man and an absolute bully. His wife had the personality of a strict character from a popular fantasy series, and the cashier was rude to everyone. She came to work impaired regularly, and it got worse once she became involved with the manager because she got away with everything. The assistant store manager replaced him but was fired 6 months later. He was having a meeting with another employee, told her to wait in his office while he dealt with something else, and forgot he had inappropriate material open on his computer. Story 65. Working in an airline call center many years ago, the airline had a recognition program that was aimed at rewarding secretaries, personal assistants, and others who did much of the booking of flights at the time. One night, a flying orchid was on the phone with an agent, and things between them got heated. The caller must have tried to use their status as a flying orchid because the next thing we heard was the agent loudly announcing, "Listen, lady, I don't care if you're a flying squirrel, the answer is no." It was the last phone call the agent would ever take. Story 66. There was a nursing student at the nursing home where I worked who was removing the fentanyl patches from patients who could not speak and putting them in her mouth. The supervisor told one patient to start screaming the next time she did it, and that is how they were able to catch her. Addiction is a serious issue. Story 67. A man watched inappropriate content on his computer at work where others could see it. He was warned to stop but did not comply. He had a medical condition affecting his sweat glands that caused him to be consistently moist. His behavior was unsettling. Story 68. A daycare teacher got into a physical fight with a parent at the daycare while their children were present. She then called her friends for backup, and multiple fights broke out in the parking lot. The teacher was pregnant as well. Story 69. I knew a girl who worked at a mortuary. She thought she did such a good makeup job on a recently deceased elderly woman that she posted photos of her work to her personal Facebook page. The family of the deceased found the photos and came to the mortuary, rightfully furious, to demand the pictures be removed and that she be terminated. She was. Story 70. I was helping with a network cabling job at a new hospital in a rural area. It was far enough from home that we stayed over for several days, but close enough to be drivable, so we had a couple of work vans. On the second night, during our midnight lunch break, as we were heading back to the work site, the team lead driving the other van, marked with the company logo, decided to spin out, fishtail, and squeal tires down the road in small-town USA. The police were on him immediately, and he was taken to jail. The most senior person had to call and wake the operations manager to inform them of the situation. We never saw the team lead again. Story 71. I worked at a recreation program for people with disabilities. During training week for a new group of hires, one new hire was asked to give ideas on how they would handle an escalated client. They said, "I would just ignore them. That person was told they could go home." Story 72. We had a girl who tattooed herself in her cubicle. While that was not the reason she was fired, the next day she came in extremely intoxicated, still wearing the same clothes she had worn to the concert the night before. Her nose started to bleed, so she began blowing bloody snot rockets. After that, human resources had enough. Story 73. I worked for one of the top 10 financial institutions in the world, at least it was at the time, and this was well over 20 years ago, so it is safe to tell this story. We handled investments for many well-known celebrities and dignitaries of the day. Being in operations, we had access to all of their information. Many of them had management companies, so all we had on file was the address of their manager's office, but not all of them did this. Some used their home address for statements and other office correspondence. A newly minted master of business administration was hired to help one of our top producers manage his clients. Guess what he did at the end of his first week? He started printing the statements of people whose names you would most assuredly recognize. If you are a human living on planet Earth, you have definitely seen these people on television shows, blockbuster movies, and on stage. Accessing this data is a major infraction, absolutely forbidden unless you are the account manager. What happened was that when the account manager left for a meeting, this individual thought it was a treat to jump on his terminal, access all the sensitive data, and print it out. His plan was to collect all the printed pages and leave with them, doing who knows what. What he did not realize is that the legal department had software that tracked this type of action, and it was flagged. While I was not on the floor directly, I could kind of hear what transpired if I stood up and looked over the wall of cubicles, and this was later confirmed by direct witnesses. They seriously doubted the account manager did the printing, so they spoke to him first privately. They quickly figured out what happened. They confronted this man whose uncle worked at the firm, which was mortifying for him because he was a great guy. He claimed innocence for about 15 minutes. Then they pressured him by threatening legal action. He finally confessed. Your word is your bond on Wall Street, and word got around quickly about this individual. He never worked in the field again. The last we heard from his uncle is that he went to dental school. Story 74. Guy was a corporate instructor at a global medical device company, training new hires at a hotel facility for a 2-week session. He took some students out to a bar for some socializing and a few games of pool. During the game, he played a prank to distract his opponent. Later, while returning to the hotel, he was in the back seat and covered the eyes of the driver during snowy conditions. He also had a sexual relationship with one of the students. He was married with 6 children at the time. Story 75. First day as a caregiver in a group home for special needs adults. My trainer showed me how to wash a female client who had soiled herself. He used a pitcher to slosh soapy water over her while she sat on the toilet. The water ran down her shoulders onto the unprotected floor. He barely cleaned her skin and made a terrible mess, all while asking her, "Why did you do this?" I reported him to the manager, and he was fired before the floor was dry. Story 76. The worst I have ever seen in almost 30 years in food service. We had a breakfast cook who was about 60 years old. Our morning dishwasher was dropped off early by his father. Mike went to punch in just across from the chef's office. The guy was in my boss's chair, engaged in inappropriate behavior while viewing teen pornography. From that point, the guy was known as Chuck-Off Chuck. The next incident was the lemon bomb. We had a distressed sous chef leave during service and throw a lemon into the fryer. For those who don't know, as the lemon rind cooks and hardens, the juice vaporizes and builds pressure inside the lemon. When the rind breaks, the fryer can explode, sending boiling oil out in a radius of about 4 feet. There is also a time delay. This can be fatal. Luckily, no one was near it at the time. We had a break in tickets, cleared the board, and all went out for a quick smoke. The dishwasher saw the explosion and was not injured. Thankfully. Story 77. Trying to steal methanol from a pharmaceuticals factory. The person was lucky to get caught because methanol is poisonous and not drinkable alcohol. Story 78. I had a worker who started on the factory floor. I caught him twice without his safety glasses. I pulled him into the office and had a coaching session, emphasizing the importance of safety, the risks associated with the job, and the potential consequences of ignoring safety measures. The next day, about 2 hours into his shift, I noticed his shoes were covered with black duct tape. Upon closer inspection, he had taped a pair of white K-Swiss shoes and was not wearing his steel-toed boots. He had left his steel-toed boots at home and tried to hide it by covering his shoes with black duct tape. I fired him on the spot. I don't think he lasted a week. Story 79. A lady I worked with very briefly, who was married by the way, asked a male coworker on a date. He said yes. I don't think he knew she was married. He is a pretty religious person. They made plans for that weekend. Later that night, while he was at work, she texted him and eventually tried to steer the conversation in a sexual direction. She asked him to send her explicit pictures from the bathroom at work. He told her he didn't like sending or receiving those types of pictures. She then sent him nude photos, including an explicit picture. This was all through Snapchat, so he used a camera that we use at work to take pictures for evidence. My boss, the kindest woman in the world, had to view and print 8 by 10 copies of the pictures for the confrontation and termination. Absolutely crazy. It was her third day on the job. Story 80. I have one for this. I'm a roofer, and I work for a well-established firm. The guy whose place I took on the team was fired for urinating off the scaffold. Straight onto the customer. Full golden shower with instant dismissal. Story 81. We have cameras in our trucks, and one of our drivers was flagged for distracted driving multiple times in one day. We reviewed the video footage and saw that he was engaging in inappropriate behavior while driving. We deliver food to disabled people. He was engaging in this behavior and then delivering food. We had to notify the case manager, who then informed the clients that their food may have been contaminated. Story 82. Restaurant work. Nice place, wins awards, but back of house will do back of house things. We are pretty lenient with the drug policy. Dishwasher smoked a full joint in the customer bathrooms during the dinner rush. If he had just gone out back, he might have just gotten a stern word, but the one rule management does not tolerate is impacting the customer experience, and you could smell it from the host stand. Fired on the spot. Story 83. A long story, but maybe worth sharing. A friend worked as part of the culinary program at a college. It was a good job, and he was proud of it. His role was behind the scenes. Initially, he helped get ingredients and equipment to the classrooms. He was soon promoted and became responsible for assisting the instructors and providing what they needed for demonstrations. One day, he noticed that the epinephrine auto-injectors in the first aid kits had expired. He followed the proper channels to get them replaced and discovered that it was the responsibility of the security department. He submitted requests to them, but after a few weeks, the auto-injectors were still not replaced. This frustrated him greatly. In a moment of anger, he went into the walk-in refrigerator, grabbed a cupcake, and smeared it onto the windshield of a pickup truck parked in front of the security office. The truck belonged to an independent contractor and was unrelated to the security department. He was fired immediately. Story 84. A government employee working on a United States Marine Corps base showed up drunk to work at 8 a.m. He propositioned a young female Marine, offering money for sex, in front of the Marine Squadron commander. 13 witnesses, 10 of whom were very high-ranking personnel within the United States Marine Corps, all gave sworn testimony regarding the events. The commander grabbed the intoxicated government worker and detained him in a room with a guard present. A formal investigation was launched, and after 6 months, the government worker was offered the option to keep his job at reduced pay, along with mandatory training and attending substance abuse classes. The government worker refused the offer, stating he did not commit the accusations and should be allowed to keep his job. He was terminated immediately. Additionally, he was also a high-ranking enlisted member of the National Guard. His National Guard unit was notified of the incident and its outcome, resulting in his dismissal from the National Guard. He lost his pension, health care, and other benefits. Last reports indicate he is now working cleaning banks at night. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.